2 minutes until showtime. One minute until showtime. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. This is Trucking with Authority. This is the show to help you on your journey to success in the trucking business, especially as a driver, owner-operator, broker, freight agent, dispatch service, you name it. This is the show for you. We can talk about anything from getting started as a driver, brand new, possibly a brand new freight broker, buying your first truck, leasing to a carrier, changing carriers, which is a huge thing right now. A lot of people are moving around on which carrier they're leased to, all the way up to getting your own authority, moving freight under your own MC numbers. Of course, there's a lot going on right now with brokers. If you are here to learn about negotiation, how to find freight, become a broker, or find freight as a motor carrier, this is a show for you. We'll be here for the next hour. Consider me your navigator on that journey to success. This show is here for you, all about you. Dial the number at the bottom of the screen, 917-889-9924. Press 1 on your keypad at any time, and we will get you on the air. Elizabeth is screening calls in the other room. This works just like any call-in radio show. Call the number. She will get your name and location and get your question, and we will bring you on the air. Don't be shy. This is not something where we're going to throw you under the bus. But there has been a lot of crazy stuff going on. I have not done a show the past couple of weeks. There's just been so busy. Freight market has kind of hit a little bit of a plateau. We stumbled a little bit, and it has shaken people. I mean, it has really rocked people down, and I don't know what to say about that. I'm kind of shocked at some of the responses that I'm getting. This has only been going on for the past couple of months. I think there's a lot of people right now that don't know their place in this business. They don't know the role they play. And if that is you, maybe you don't know it's you. But if you feel that you are a victim, if you feel that you are being taken advantage of, if you feel that somebody else is doing better than you and it's at your expense, that's what I want to talk about tonight. I labeled this show tonight Role Play. Where do you fit into this industry? What is your role? What is your key element? What do you do in this industry? And I think my opinion here is if you understand where you fit in, you will have a much better chance of success overall if you understand what you do and then branch out from that to understand what everybody around you does. So you understand what you do, who your customers really are, how the relationship works and the transaction happens between you and your customer, and maybe even beyond that, between your customer and their customer. Ultimately, we're all here to provide a service. The transportation industry is a service industry. Who are we providing the services to, and how can we be better at that? And if there is somebody in playing the middleman game, in other words, if you are a carrier or a driver and you have a broker middleman, how does that fit in? And how is that role changing what you do currently? The freight market has changed just over the past few months. There is no denying it. But we are still in a fantastic market. Unfortunately, almost everybody that is struggling right now, almost everybody is a new carrier, new entrant, new MC number. That is a telling tale. That means a lot. I talked to somebody recently, got his authority in February, and was asking me why rates are so bad. Somebody that just got their brand new carrier authority is asking me why rates are so bad. In the record season, absolutely record-breaking of all time, all recorded history, record-breaking rates, high time, got their authority, and now that things have started to level out and plateau, come down a little bit and normalize, is asking me why rates are so bad and telling me that he's about to go out of business if things don't come back up. And I can think of about a half a dozen right off the top of my head right now, people that are in that exact same situation. And they argue with me tooth and nail that this is not normal, that this is not correct, and there's no way that people can survive this way. And that's why I think it's time that we all stand back a little bit and we all look at ourselves and what role we play in this business. What is it that we do? Because if you feel that you are the victim in a time right now when things are actually pretty doggone good, the freight market is not all that bad. I've got some rate information I wanted to go over before we get started just to somewhat illustrate that point. If we look at DAT trend lines, which is one of the bigger players in the information market, we can see that just over the past 4 weeks, and I always compare the van market. I explain this every week. I always start with the van market because it is the most commoditized, the most common, everyday, Joe Blow, least amount of training, least amount of skill. And if you're pulling a van and that hurts your feelings, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. It is the easiest thing out there to pull. If you're pulling a van trailer, that is where most of the market indicators are going to show up first because it is the commodity of trucking. Trucking in general is a commodity market, but the van market especially. So if you look at over the past 4 weeks, 4 weeks ago, $2.13 per mile. 3 weeks ago, $2.11 per mile. 2 weeks ago, $2.10 per mile. Slowly coming down, obviously. And just this past week, this past Saturday, week ending Saturday, $2.09 per mile. $2.09 per mile. That's a nationwide average, meaning that there will be good markets and bad markets. Some people will do better, some people will do worse. It's an average. $2.09 per mile. If we look back about 18 months ago, a little over a year ago, early 2017, and going back further into 2016 and into 2015, that 2.5, almost 3-year time frame, we begged for rates like that. Begged for it. Absolutely begged for this market. For 3 solid years, we begged for that. It was 2014 was the last time we had seen rates over $2 per mile. 2015, they dropped sub $2 per mile, stayed there until late, about 1 year ago. It was really only about 1 year ago. October, roughly, time frame, 2017, only 1 year ago, when we saw van rates even inch up over $2 per mile, and that was for an almost 3-year consecutive period. And now we're at $2 per mile. Why are we complaining? We should be happy about this. This is a good market right now. Yes, it's harder than it was a couple of months ago when we were setting rates and there was so much freight that it was just anywhere you went, you could fall out of your truck and fall into a pile of money. But it's a decent market overall. It's still a decent market. It's still average rates. If that's the indicator that we're looking at, it's still a great market. Matter of fact, if we look back, like I said, about 18 months ago, before we had this uptick in rates, before we started setting records, and again, that only started about 12 months ago, 1 year ago, before we had that, which plateaued January, February, March timeframe, and depending on which segment you look at, the first half of the year is really the best, either the first quarter or second quarter. Vans plateaued in first quarter, and so much, I guess, right about that time for reefers and going into the second quarter. And flatbeds definitely plateaued, or peaked, rather, in the second quarter. But the first half of 2018 obviously absolutely set records, and a lot of people went out and got trucks. But if you go back, a lot of people in this industry have such a short memory. It's horrible. If you go back about 18 months ago, the average rates for a van were literally just above average operating costs. When you factor in driver pay, minor company profit, factor in maintenance, fuel, fixed costs, and so forth, when you factor all of that in, 18 months to 24 months ago, we were bumping literally just above operational costs. And now we're 50 cents a mile above that in some cases. Why are we complaining? So the key here is we have to learn how to work the market in our favor. We have to learn, first of all, in order to work the market in our favor, which I talk about all the time. I talk about negotiation. I talk about the trend lines, talk about the rates. I talk about that all the time. And it's absolutely key to give another gentleman a plug here. It's absolutely key to understand and know your rates. And I don't want to spend a lot of time in this show just covering rates, because there's some other shows that do that. But the one gentleman that I think has really started to nail it lately is LoSean Parks. If you check out LoSean Parks, Trucking with LoSean Parks, the rates, freight and rates show that he does once a week, and he does it, I believe he'll do it after this show tonight, or he've already done it today. But check that show out. He covers the DAT trend lines. He covers the rate view much more in depth than I give on this show. But we're still experiencing great markets. And I know that the last show that LoSean did, he mentioned me and he said that I'm talking about how rates are still good and he's seeing things drop. I run a lot of van trucks as well. Vans obviously are the weakest market, and they always will be. They always have been. It's, again, the most commoditized market of all three segments. I run about half my fleet are vans. The other half are platform with flatbed, step deck, RGN. We're still able to keep our vans profitable. We're still doing quite well, actually, in some markets. One of my trucks actually set some records this week. So we're doing quite well. Could it have been easier to do well a few months ago, first half of the year? Absolutely. But if you're running a business, you have to understand the markets that you're in currently. If you started your business in the first half of 2018 and you're struggling right now, this is the show for you. This is why I wanted to do this show tonight. We cannot have this victim mentality anymore. We have to figure out what our role is so that we can focus on what will directly impact our own businesses, directly. Not finger point, not try to complain about how somebody else is doing or how somebody else is taking advantage of us, or how beat our chest because we got a good rate and they got a bad rate, or complain that somebody else is taking cheap freight and they shouldn't do that. Forget about all that. It's time that we focus on our own businesses, stop whining, grow up, pull up our pants, and get to work, because that's what it's going to take. I've got a few things I wanted to talk about to try to clarify some of that here tonight. Again, I really, really would love to hear all of your comments, so call the number 917-889-9924. Press 1 on your keypad. Looks like we have some callers in here already. If you're on the line, please go ahead, press number 1. I'd love to hear your comments about this. So a couple of the things that we need to realize is, and I've talked about this before, you have to understand and recognize who your customer actually is and the role that you play, and it helps understand the role that you play if you understand the role that they play. There is a huge disconnect. And over the past few weeks, I've started to see it's become a gap is just growing in the basic principles of the understanding of what everybody's role is in this business. I mean, what does a broker do? Why are they taking advantage of us? The brokers are screwing us. The carriers are, that driver is running too cheap freight. And then just carriers in general. This carrier is charging too much. They're back charging for that. They should be paying this, and the carrier's taking advantage of you, and the brokers are taking advantage of you, and everybody's out to rake everybody else over the coals. This is business, people. This is business. It has been business since the beginning. If you wanted to be a truck driver, go back to being a company driver. If you want to own a business and you want to be an owner-operator, now's the time to start putting it together and start running it like a business. And I don't have any inclination of sugarcoating it tonight. There's no way to be nice tonight. Again, go ahead, press number 1 on your keypad for all the callers that are on the line already. Please call in 917-889-9924. I much prefer to take the calls over the comments on the video stream, so please call the number. If you're driving and you're watching the video stream, please stop the video stream, call the number. You can listen live on the phone, 917-889-9924. And you can find this show on the Trucking with Authority YouTube channel to listen to the replay, or you can listen again through your phone on blogtalkradio.com, finding the Trucking with Authority show, Trucking with Authority show channel. Let me pull up the videos here so I can follow along with my own comments. All right. So here's what I want to start talking about. Have some notes here about what does a freight broker do. Got some notes here about what does a carrier do and what does a driver do. But these are my notes, and I wanted to start with FMCSA's printed version here. And there's some other comments that I pulled off of Facebook that I thought were just absolutely ludicrous. Let me pull up a couple of comments here. I tried to print everything out so I didn't have to do it this way, but it'd be easier just to pull it up on the screen while I'm talking to you. So bear with me. Again, call the number at the bottom of your screen. There's a few people that I had invited to come on and call the show. I hope they have the intestinal fortitude to come on here and debate this with me. By the way, I hope you all went out and voted today. November 6, 2018. Election day, midterm elections. We are in a time of, I think it's more important than ever to get out and vote. Politics are more divided than ever. So if you haven't voted yet, if your polls happen to be still open wherever you are in the country, if you haven't voted yet, you can catch this show on a replay. Get out there and vote. I see that, Dave. Now I understand. Took me a minute to just catch on with that, Dave. Okay. A few days ago, or a few weeks ago rather, on the end of the show, if you didn't catch it, somebody asked a question about dispatch services. And it set me off, I'll tell you that. It set me off. I'm going to bring that up again here a little bit tonight. I want to talk about that a little more. If you didn't catch my rant about it a couple of weeks ago, go back and check. This was the last show I did 2 weeks ago. Go back and check that show. At the very end of the show, it was about somebody asked a simple question, and I wanted a 15-minute rant of what I thought about dispatch services. I want to talk about that because the role that a dispatch service plays in this business is super important as well. Where do they fit in? And if you think brokers are screwing you, if you think brokers are out to get you, all right. I keep pulling up the wrong page here. I apologize for this. I did have all this stuff up and actually printed out before I went on the air, but I don't know where my pages went. I think they disappeared into the neighboring office. All right. Broker. A broker means a person who for compensation arranges or offers to arrange the transportation of property by an authorized motor carrier. Motor carriers, or persons who are employees or bona fide agents of carriers, are not brokers within the meaning of this section when they arrange or offer to arrange the transportation of shipments which they are authorized to transport and which they have accepted and legally bound themselves to transport. So a broker gets paid to arrange or offer to arrange the transportation of property by an authorized carrier. Pretty simple, right? A broker arranges to pair up a shipper with a carrier. That is their main job. And I don't want to get too far off on a tangent right here, but what exactly does a dispatch service do? Load, truck, I just want to throw that out there. But a broker arranges for a shipper, a load, and a truck for compensation. They get paid to arrange a load to go on a truck. That's their job. By definition, they are a broker. Now, a broker, to be a broker, they have to post a $75,000 bond. They have to do all of the same registration requirements as a carrier. The UCR, they have to go through get a DOT number with an MCS 150, the OP1, and get an MC number as well. To get activated, they post the bond. They have to post the process agents, the BOC3, and they're active. A little easier than becoming a carrier, but they still have those requirements. Now, yes, I will admit, to get a broker's bond can be financed through an insurance company. You can finance it through a bank. As long as you can come up with a way to finance it, if you have good credit, it's fairly inexpensive. In some cases, only a few $100s per year. It's money that you spend, but certainly cheaper than getting regular insurance. But that is the minimum requirements to be a broker. And I can tell you that almost no broker out there stops at the minimum requirements because you can't in the marketplace. You just can't. Nobody will hire. As a matter of fact, it is not required for a carrier to have cargo insurance. Not required by law. Find a carrier that doesn't have cargo insurance. It's kind of hard to find. The same thing applies with brokers. Almost every broker out there, and I'm sure there are some that don't, but almost every broker out there has contingency insurance to cover themselves in the case that the carrier's insurance doesn't pull through. So a broker has to check out, and this is the reason why brokers do all of the due diligence to do the background checks and so forth on a carrier. They get your MC number when you book a load, and I'm talking to people that have dealt with brokers before. And I'll go back a little bit and baby step this and how the process works for those of you that haven't. But they'll get your MC number, and they'll do a background check. They want to see that your authority is active, that you have insurance, that you haven't been suspended. They want to see that you have a good safety score. The same applies for a broker. A broker also, when a carrier books a load, they do a background check on the broker. They make sure they have a good credit score. They make sure that they have everything that they need in place to be compliant. Most brokers also have that contingency cargo insurance. That cargo insurance is what opens the doors for them in most cases. And it's the reason why most carriers just can't get their foot in the door with a lot of the big box direct shippers. Everybody at a carrier that I know, especially the newer people, wants to cut out brokers. And I get that. Let's cut out the middleman. But most carriers cannot afford the time, effort, and frankly the money to get into a lot of the big shippers. And by big shippers, I mean the guys that ship thousands of loads every day. The mom and pop shops, yes, absolutely. The small carriers can do that. They can service those. But the brokers provide multiple millions of dollars of insurance coverage. They provide the contingency liability coverage. They provide that bond that can be tapped into if a broker doesn't pay the carrier. But they also provide a degree of separation between the carrier and the shipper. And that degree of separation is a degree of liability insurance in some ways, because if there's an accident, whether it's a cargo claim, a fatality accident, and an automotive collision accident, if there's a lawsuit, that broker insulates both parties because they have that extra insurance. There's also another layer that somebody has to cut through, because obviously we are in a sue-happy society. If you are in a lawsuit as a driver, you will be sued. The carriers whose name's on your door will be sued. The company who owns the freight in your trailer will be sued. The broker that arranged for the transportation of that freight will be sued. If you happen to have sponsors on your trailer that many of the YouTubers have, if you have sponsors on that trailer, they will be sued. The shipper will be sued. Possibly the receiver will be sued. Everybody involved will be sued. They're going to go after the person with the deepest pockets. Most of the time, it's not the one truck carrier. They're going to go after that $1 million of insurance, of course. But who has the deeper pockets? The $1 million insurance policy of the one truck carrier, or the billions of dollars that the mega shippers have? So think about it from the shipper's point of view. Would you want to have that direct liability, that direct interaction with the carrier? You want the face-to-face interaction and you want to be that person? No. You want that separation. That's one of the reasons why a lot of shippers farm out their logistics operations. They close down. They don't have to have any staff to do it. They farm that out, and a 3PL or even a 4PL will handle all of the logistics. A broker, 3PL and 4PL are terms for different levels of how a broker handles the business. They farm that out, and it provides that degree of separation for liability, for cost reduction. And there are so many levels that a broker, and so many different degrees of separation that this broker plays, it's not even funny. Carriers don't think about that. Carriers absolutely don't think about that. Let's see. All right, and somebody asked me, and I want to do this as I go along here. How are their sponsors responsible for the accidents? How are they not responsible for the accidents? Obviously, they have their name on the truck. They absolutely will be sued. Absolutely, which is why I've had people ask somebody. I've had somebody ask why, as a business plan, they couldn't go out and get all their trailers wrapped to get sponsors and so forth. That is absolutely why. Because if you are in an accident, the liabilities are outrageous. Couple of reasons. Number one, whoever, the four-wheeler or what have you that runs into that truck and a fatality accident, everybody is getting sued, as I mentioned. If there's a sponsor on the side of that trailer, they're going to assume that that sponsor has some stake in ownership. They have the money there. They're absolutely going after them. How are the trailers company liable? And I'm not really sure what you're saying there, Alex Express. But the point here is everybody in the picture is getting sued, which is one of the reasons why shippers prefer to use brokers over carriers. A lot of shippers will not deal with direct carriers. They just won't deal with that. So that's kind of the legalities behind what a broker does. But what does a broker do in the day-to-day operations? Of course, they find freight. That's the big complaint from carriers that I talk to. All they do is sit around with a phone and a computer, and they don't do anything. That's fine. They spend weeks or months trying to develop customer relationships to possibly get one load. Weeks and months. I personally have 2 full-time broker agents working for me. One of them has been making 100 phone calls. That's his goal. 100 phone calls every single day. We've had a few warm leads out of that. But he's been with us for a few weeks. And it's not as easy as just knocking on doors and they're just going to give you your freight. There are a lot more loopholes to deal with than that. We have some stuff for the phone calls, the hundreds of phone calls, thousands now of phone calls that he's made. We have a few possibilities, possible deals that might happen in 6 months, 4 to 6 months. We're going to have to follow up and pursue these customers for 4 to 6 months. Now, I'm a broker and a carrier. We've got 22 trucks now. 22 trucks on the Patriot Star Incorporated, and we've got 2 full-time agents on the Patriot Star Logistics side. And that's all that we do. And yes, there is insurance that covers these sponsors against lawsuits. There are plenty of them. But, and believe me, they all have insurance, which is why everybody's going to be brought into a lawsuit. Because if you have $1 million insurance policy, that's dollar signs in the eyes of whoever got hurt or killed. Absolutely. And if there are multi-million-dollar corporations, companies that are backing these sponsorships, these stickers on the trailer or on the trucks, they are absolutely going after them. All right. And I'm getting distracted by the comments on YouTube. Again, I much rather you all, instead of making the comments, please call. There's a few people that I'm hoping do call in tonight. 917-889-9924. Press 1 on your keypad once you're on the air, or once you're in, and we will get you on the air. All right, we're going to jump over to Kenny in Arkansas. Kenny, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's going on?
What's going on, Kenny? How can we help you?
You doing all right?
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, you talk about sponsorships and stuff. How do you go about that? I mean, what is that for? And explain that a little bit more.
You mean how would you get somebody to sponsor you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all,
Yes,
you would need to have you would want to have some type of presence. There are people that would be possibly willing to pay to put their name on the side of your truck, like a rolling billboard. But again, most of the time, the reason you don't see that very often is because it is a liability for those companies. So more often than not, they will not do it. It is expensive to do that, to completely wrap a trailer. More often than not, they will not want to have their name out there. A couple reasons. Number one, if you're in an accident, they get sued because their name is out there on the trailer. Number two, if you're in an accident and you kill somebody, and we all see the pictures on the Facebook groups, the Wall of Shame groups and so forth, all the pictures of all these trucks that are torn up, gone under low bridges and hit cars, driving on the wrong side of the road or what have you. None of us really know what happened or how it got there, but it happens. It's the definition of an accident, right? If you had a multi-million-dollar brand that you've put all that time, effort, and money into developing, would you want it in one of those pictures? Probably not. So it's kind of difficult to get sponsors like that. If it's a trucking specific sponsor, maybe. Now that said, I've had people offer to sponsor me here on this show. I've had several people ask me. One of the reasons I don't have a lot of sponsors, I have referrals and so forth, but I don't have direct sponsors. Reason being, and I've always said this, I don't want to be swayed on what I talk about. I will have guests come on the show, just like I had somebody from Convoy on a couple of weeks ago. They come on the show, we talked about their system, and afterwards, I talked about their system, right? I went through and told the good and the bad points. I put on a seminar last year. I had people come to the seminar that were sponsors, And I told every one of them, I don't want you paying to be there because I don't want you coming in there to sell anything from stage. And then when they got up there, I said, here's the thing. Because I didn't ask you to pay and you didn't pay anything, I allowed you to get on stage and I allowed you to present what you have. But that means I also get to tell you the bad things. And I went through, and if you, and Kenny, you were there, I went through and talked about reasons you wouldn't want to use some of these products. So sponsorship is kind of it's a tightrope to walk.
It's like, I don't like putting names out there, but even like, you know, Snyder and Prime and all that, they're the ones that might have a worse safety record or whatever, but they still get them big sponsors. I don't know, because they have so many more trucks or what, but I see a lot of sponsors like on Prime and Snyder, Warne trucks, Swift, so I was just wondering if they were able to get it. And they're the ones that's in them videos that you're always talking about.
What kind of,
and if,
maybe I'm thinking about something else here. What kind of sponsors are you talking about?
I don't know, like sponsor like for oil or, you know, the Army. I mean, there's all kinds of different things, military sponsorship.
Okay, so a lot of those are not actually sponsorships so much as donations. A lot of times they have, they will put recruiting signs and, you know, the Army, the military, and they do that not so much to promote the military, but they're doing that because it makes them look good to have a partnership and promote stuff like that. That's one of those reasons. A lot of times when you see them pulling trailers that have the, you know, oil and different things like that, those may be trailers that they've been paid to pull that trailer. That's more often than not, that's what happens there. But again, there are some legal ramifications to that as well. If you were to go out there and throw an Army sign on your truck and you were in an accident and then the Army got penalized for that somehow, you can bet that they've got some deep pockets to come after you as well. But we're getting a little off topic here, so I'm gonna go ahead and put you back on hold. But I appreciate you calling in, Kenny. But what I wanted to really focus on here tonight was, and again, anybody that has any questions or comments, go ahead, 917-889-9924. It's an open floor. Anything you want to talk about, even if it's not related to the topic. But I do want to try to stay on this tonight. So the freight broker has got to find the freight, and they have to develop those relationships, the contracts, a lot of hoops to jump through. Just one of the small little snippets I posted in the freight trucking rates and lanes group on Facebook, just a small little screenshot of a couple of the things that one of the big customers wanted us to provide as a broker. There's no way that at 22 trucks I could provide those things, but as a broker, possibly. And if I get my foot in as a broker, I might be able to broker some to my own trucks and also broker them out to other trucks. But I'm competing with the huge brokers that have literally billions with a B, billions of dollars backing them. It's very difficult to do that. To get your foot in the door with these mega box shippers that have regular freight, routine, consistent freight, which is really what we're all looking for, right? We want something that's all the time. One of the biggest ways that you can do that to be successful is find a dedicated route and stay on it consistently. I've had a lot of owner-operators come to me, and I've had opportunities for that. They turn it down because they prefer to run wild. And I understand the idea of having the freedom to go wherever you want, do whatever you want to do, but there's also a whole lot of value to having that dedicated account, consistent money. It may not be record-setting every week. You might be able to knock it out of the park one week in the spot market, but what I have found is our dedicated accounts tend to be more profitable but at year-end than our spot market running wild accounts. So that's what most people tend to look for. In order to get that, you have to be able to get in with somebody that's got the volume and the consistency of freight. So brokers do that for you. They get in. They get their foot in the door. If you only have one truck or 22 trucks like me, you can't probably handle the big customers like General Motors and Ford and PepsiCo and all these companies that they've got literally thousands of loads moving. Not all of them are knocking out of the park rates, but they're consistent rates. And if you can get in with a broker that has those, they have the capacity of literally every carrier out here. They can use anybody. That's why the brokers become important. That's why they are able to provide the services to these shippers. So they do the sales work. They are basically, as much as they are outsourced for the logistics of the shipper, they are also an outsourced sales team for you as a carrier. If you were to hire a full-time salesperson, a good full-time salesperson, you're looking at 6 figures. That's a 6-figure job. If you have 1, 5, 10, 20 trucks, 6 figures is kind of hard to stomach. So this is kind of this is where there's a disconnect between carriers and drivers, carriers and brokers. The services that a freight broker provides are huge, and most carriers, like it or not, literally cannot survive without them. Almost every carrier that I talk to that complains about brokers doesn't have any customers, at least nothing consistent that they can pull on their own. If any of you want to talk about that, 917-889-9924, please. So on the other side of it, once they have the freight and they spend months getting the freight, now they've got to find trucks. They eventually will build relationships with trucks, and the best brokers find a truck that they will work with consistently, and they'll have that load that goes out every Monday. They'll find a truck that matches, and that truck will be on that load every Monday, which is why that load, which is probably one of their best shipments, will never hit a load board. It'll never be on the so-called spot market because they've got a contract dedicated truck to cover their contract dedicated shipment. Brokers can still set up contracted shipments, and they can do it at fair rates. But you have to understand, a contracted shipment does not demand the same rates as a spot market shipment. It may be higher, it may be lower, but it'll be consistent. It'll be consistent year round. Now I want to circle back to that consistency, so put a pin in that. Now, everybody that's set up with a broker, that you've done the carrier setups, filled out the contracts, I tear those contracts apart. We all know, I talk about it here on the show, all the red flags about contracts. I posted one of the worst ones. I do not leave negative reviews for anybody, but today, the first time in about 3 years, I went on the DAT directory and left a negative review for Millhouse Transport. I'm going to throw them out there because that's how bad I feel about it. Or Millhouse Logistics, rather. Horrible contract. Don't anybody sign that. Don't work with them. Until they change that contract and they're willing to negotiate, I implore you, do not do it. I put snippets of their contract and the things that they want you to do. They want you to do things that are virtually illegal actions to try to avoid paying you. They put the shipper at risk. I think that most of the time they're double brokering, which is why they want to do this. They put the other broker at risk. They put you as the carrier at risk. Absolutely do not work with them. But they have you fill out these contracts. What they're doing is they're doing the background check on the carrier. As a broker, I can tell you that I have, until I was on that side of the table, I used to feel horrible about, how terrible some of these brokers were. Let me tell you, by and large, the majority of carriers that I talk to, and I would say that most of you that are listening to this show, or you're in the various Facebook groups, you're trying to learn more, trying to interact and understand the market a little better, say you're not some of these. But I talk to carriers that are out there, man. I mean, they have no clue. There's no reason they should be in business. Absolutely horrible. Horrible. And the things they say, I teach negotiation, the things that they ask for, outrageous. All the brokers I've talked to, and I've talked to thousands of them. Literally, we are set up here with thousands of brokers over the years. The thousands of brokers that we have talked to and set up with, there's a handful that were at the caliber of these carriers. I mean, they were absolutely, and I would say about half of the carriers or more, are absolutely horrible to work with because they have no clue what they're doing. They should not be in business, but they are. That's our competition, guys. That is our competition. Half the industry, or more than half, I mean, this is from my experience, calling almost every driver or every carrier on the load boards and so we're trying to find different ones. Most of the time, the reason we won't work with the carriers because they're horrible, bad safety records. You talk to them and they have no clue about what trucks. I mean, literally, you ask them what kind of truck they have, they don't even know. Do you have a van? Well, what do you mean? Really? This is the caliber of carriers that we have out there, and by and large, it's probably a good majority of them. I am talking from the broker seat tonight. I told you I'm not going to be nice about this. Absolutely horrible. Finally, as a broker, what most carriers don't realize, brokers assume the majority of the risk. The majority of the risk. Brokers assume much more risk than most carriers. And I'll tell you why. Number one, I already mentioned, if the carrier gets in an accident, the carrier is going to get sued, but so is the broker. Broker will be held liable. But the broker also has to extend that carrier credit or extend that shipper credit, and most of the time pay the truck before they receive the money. They have an outlay of money before they get paid. Yes, I understand the truck has to buy the truck has to buy fuel and so forth, but the broker typically has to outlay. Let's assume that the broker does make 20% on a load, 15 or 20%. If they're making 20%, they have to pay 80% before they get paid. Now, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I'm a carrier, and I lease on owner-operators. As a carrier leasing on owner-operators, I play the exact same role. So if you, as an owner-operator, are leased to a carrier, that carrier, for all intents and purposes, the relationship that carrier plays to you is the exact same relationship that a broker plays to a carrier. It's the exact same relationship. You have to understand, when you are an owner-operator leased to a carrier, that carrier is your one and only customer. There is no other customer. The broker is their customer. The shipper is the broker's customer. If the carrier is fortunate enough to have direct shippers, that direct shipper is the carrier's customer. It is absolutely not the owner-operator's customer. That carrier can direct that truck on what to do, how to do it, when to do it. There's a big misconception that the owner-operators should or would or could or have to, by law, have to allow the owner-operators to do things certain ways. IRS rules say that the carrier has to allow a contractor to perform the job the way they see fit. But it doesn't say anything about the contractor performing whatever job they want to. So if a carrier decides truck one, you are going to take this load whether you like it or not. The shipper, or the owner-operator rather, can take the load or quit. That's their option. But absolutely, the carrier can dictate exactly what the owner-operators do. Everything. And it would not break any IRS rules and so forth. They can tell you what to do. They can't tell you how to do it, but they can absolutely tell you what to do. So again, the broker can do the same thing. A broker can tell the carrier exactly what to do. And if they're talking directly to the truck, that truck has to do exactly what the broker says. So in one of my posts earlier today, I posted about how I'm working on this contract with a direct shipper. As a broker, I'm trying to secure freight for the brokerage so that I can broker to a carrier. And somebody said, well, if you agree to that, you are not a broker, that you would be acting as a carrier. Exactly right, because as I just explained, the broker takes on the role, exact same role as the carrier would take on with owner-operators. The broker's job is to hire a truck to move the freight. That is the broker's job. What is a carrier's job that has owner-operators? Hire a truck to move the freight. It's the exact same job. And I see several comments here, and some of them are real good, but I'm going to come back to that. All right, so knowing that the broker is the carrier's customer and the carrier is the owner-operator's customer, something I want to bring up. And I want to talk about where drivers fit into this all as well. And this is where I was hoping somebody would call in. I was holding this toward the end of the show. I'm hoping somebody would call into this. But all this complaining about brokers taking the lion's share of the rate is nonsense. And I'll tell you several examples of why, if you even knew what the broker charged, doesn't matter at all. Not one iota. It does not matter. I never understood why a carrier wants to know what a broker makes. That's what anybody, call me and tell me why you need to know what a broker makes. Please, anybody, call me now. Tell me why you need to know what a broker makes. Type in that. Call me and tell me why you need to know what a broker makes on a load. Phone number 917-889-9924. All right, so with that comment, somebody posted this here. They were talking about how horrible it is and that brokers should be more transparent, which I think is hogwash. I don't think it matters. But somebody posted this regulation. I used to quote this regulation myself until I had an attorney put me in line, and I'll tell you what's going on here. 49 CFR 371.3, records to be kept by brokers. A broker shall keep a record of each transaction. For purposes of this section, brokers may keep master lists of consignors and the address and registration number of the carrier, rather than repeating this information for each transaction. The record shall show: 1. The name and address of the consignor. 2. The name, address, and registration number of the originating motor carrier. 3. Bill of lading or freight bill number. 4. The amount of compensation received by the broker for the brokerage service performed and the name of the payer. This is required by law for the broker to keep this information, right? I'll read that one again. This is what everybody wants. The amount of compensation received by the broker for the brokerage service performed and the name of the payer is a record to be kept by brokers. 5. A description of any non-brokerage service performed in connection with each shipment or other activity, the amount of compensation received for the service, and the name of the payer. And 6. The amount of any freight charges collected by the broker and the date of the payment to the carrier. Brokers shall keep the records required by this section for a period of 3 years. And then this is the part that everybody gets hung up on. This is an actual regulation. Each party to a broker transaction has the right to review the record of transaction required to be kept by these rules. So each party, being the carrier, the broker, and the shipper, have the right to review this. So here's what happens in the real world. There are a lot of regulations, a lot of things that are required to be done. But in the real world, enforcement becomes an issue. Now here's the problem. The broker has a right to make money. There is no regulation on how much money a broker can make, just as there's no regulation on how much money a carrier can make. If you were to ask for this information, and in the same thread, somebody said this is the letter that you should send to the broker. Use this sample letter below to request paperwork from a broker. Dear Mr. Broker, it says, I am requesting to see your records from such and such date pertaining to such and such trip number, a load I hauled through your brokerage service. Please know that under federal regulations 49 CFR part 371.3, you are required to keep certain records documenting broker transactions for 3 years, and I have a right to review those records. Those records include the amount of compensation you received for the broker service performed and the name of the payer, and the amount of any freight charges you have collected and the date of payment to the carrier. Federal statutes also permit me to recover attorney's fees if you force me to take you to court to compel compliance with the regulations, 49 U.S.C. 14704, yada yada. Please make copies of these records and mail them to me, or set these records aside for me to review in your office. Thank you for your cooperation. All right. I will tell you right now. I will gladly give this to you. If you ask me for something, I will gladly give it to you. And when I do, it won't make any sense to you. It will not make any sense to you as a carrier. It'll probably tick you off, but it won't make any sense to you. Most brokers, most by and large, are going to say, go pack sand. Not going to do it. I'm not going to waste my time with that. What is the financial incentive, the financial benefit to having those records as a carrier? What is the financial benefit to having that record? That is the question, the thing that I would like to know. Why would you need to have this information? Let's say that a broker got a load for $10,000 and got you to move it and agreed to move it for $250. What financial incentive would there be for you to have this information? You agreed to it. You signed a rate confirmation, which is a contract to move that freight. I don't care how much they made. They make $1 million and they paid you $200. Who cares? You agreed to move that load. Why would you even want to bother wasting your time requesting this information? But let's assume you did, and the broker said no. What are you going to do about it? So they pointed to this again. If you force me to take you to court to compel compliance with these regulations, your federal statutes also permit me to recover attorney's fees. You understand that you're going to have to pay those attorney fees before any court is going to award you any compensation. So a few $1,000s out front. And there's no financial incentive for you to have them. Nobody's going to go through with that. A broker, like these multi-billion-dollar companies, let's talk about TQL, C.H. Robinson, Swift, and Knight Logistics. These billion with a B companies, when they get a letter from a one-truck carrier like this, when they have rooms full of attorneys on staff and rooms full of attorneys on staff backing them up, do you think that they care about this letter? First of all, maybe they'll just send you the documents to get you to shut up. And if they do, you're not gonna know anything either way, if it's a good thing or a bad thing. If you don't, their attorneys are just going to write a letter and say, no, take us to court. And then at that point, try to find an attorney that you can afford to go through with it. The real world, you're not going to get this stuff unless a broker just doesn't care and just going to send it to you. And if you did, why would you want it? So let me tell you some of the things that happen. I had an opportunity to bid a load from Virginia to Ohio, and it was a good load. It would have paid great. But the shipper knows that that load paid great. So in order to bid that load, it's a good lane, because if I can get my trucks into Ohio, it's a good market. In order to get that, I would also have to bid that same load, the same shipper from Virginia to Connecticut. Unfortunately, it would have to be at the same rate as the loads that went to, at least the rate per mile wise, have to be the same rate of the loads that went to Ohio. A good rate to Ohio is not such a good rate to Connecticut, but it was the same rate. The reason that they did that was because when that product is on the store shelf, they want it to be about the same price anywhere in the country. So they try to work those rates out and find logistics providers that can help stabilize the prices. So in order to bid that, I would have to make the good paying, really, really good paying load to Ohio average, so I could take money from that load and put it on the money that was the stuff going to the New England area. I would literally lose money on every load going to Connecticut. I would make up the difference on the money on the ones going to Ohio. Problem is, if I showed you those rate confirmations, if I showed you the one that went to Ohio and you saw that I was making, I don't know, 30% on those loads, you'd be absolutely livid. But if I showed you the ones that were going to Connecticut, showing you that I took a loss of about 5%, and I had to take an extra 5 to 10% off of the Ohio loads to stick over there on that pile, would you give me money back? Let's go back to this. If somebody showed you that they took a loss, would you give them money back? No. Would you continue working with a broker that continually took losses on you, that continually came up short? How long do you think it would be before that broker was insolvent and could no longer pay the bills? The broker has to make money too. How much money? Some say 10, 15%. I've heard some say 5 to 8%. But let's assume it's 10 to 15%. Let's say we mandate that every broker only makes absolutely 10% on every load. So if I have to make 10% on every load, how am I going to pay for those loads going to Connecticut? I'm going to make 10%. Am I going to be able to force you as the carrier to take that load at a loss? Because I know you won't take it for that rate. I would have to put my own money into that. I would have to take it as a loss. But now you want to mandate that I make 10% on every load. I would gladly make 10% over taking a loss. Are you going to take the hit as the carrier? I doubt it. So they assume the risk. They equalize things for the shippers. Shippers prefer to work with brokers that have the ability to do these things for them. It's a service that the brokers can provide. Brokers can provide things like, I had a local shipment here. I was able to bid. It was 6 truckloads, just local, but I had to arrange labor. I had to arrange a forklift. I had to arrange the 6 trucks. I put a few of them on my trucks and outsourced the rest. But it all went on one invoice, one bill. And it was itemized. But even being itemized, if somebody saw that invoice laying on the table, one of those carriers, mind you, that one invoice was enough to pay for labor for 10 crew members. No. 20 crew members, 10 on each end. 20 crew members, 2 forklifts, and 6 truckloads for 2 days, over the course of 2 days. That invoice, if I had laid it out on the table, how do you think a carrier would respond to that? Do you think that if I gave them that invoice, even if it was itemized and it showed what it was, that it would matter? No. So I think people have a huge misconception of what their role is. Most carriers cannot go out and get direct freight. It's not possible for a small carrier to do it with some shippers. There are some that they can, absolutely. I had direct shippers before I got the brokerage, of course. But nothing major and consistent. So I think you really have to understand where you're coming from. Now, the spot market. Spot market versus contract freight. You can get contract freight from brokers. Another misconception in this industry is that the majority of freight moves off load boards and through brokers, and that's absolutely incorrect. In fact, statistically, only about probably about 7%, 7 to 8% of the freight in this country moves through brokers on the spot market. Less than 10%, for sure. Only less than 10% moves on the spot market. The majority of carriers that are in these Facebook groups that are watching this show and everything work in the spot market, and they're complaining about rates. Most of those brokers have contract rates, and they're moving their contract rates, but they're not moving them on spot market. They're moving them through load boards, but they're still contracted rates. And a lot of those, they put that one truck consistent, and they develop a contract rate. There are billions of dollars of freight moved every day, but they're moved on contracts, and only a few hundred million actually make it to the spot market. The majority of it is contract freight. You have to understand where brokers fit in the bigger picture as well. There are a lot of brokers that move contract freight. Kind of went on a rant tonight, and I apologize. I did want to talk more about the carrier's role and the driver's role. The driver, absolutely, even if you're a company driver, still provide a service to that carrier. You still provide a service to the owner-operator that you work for, to the carrier that you work for. I like to tell people that even if you're a W-2 employee, an actual employee of the company, not a contractor, you're still self-employed, because you could still quit that job tomorrow and go get a job somewhere else. You still are selling your services, even if it's dollars for hours. You're just selling your services to that carrier. All right. I'm going to switch gears here. I went on a rant. I was hoping to get some more calls about these topics. I do have a couple calls here that I will get to before we wrap things up tonight, and then I will get to these Facebook, or rather the YouTube comments. All right, I am going to go to Chris in New York. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kenny. I know I'm one of the important callers that you wanted to hear from tonight. I called in as soon as I could.
Okay. Yeah, I was absolutely looking forward to hearing from you, Chris. Truck Driver Survival Group, Chris Martinez. How can we help you tonight?
Thank you. Let's see. The first topic, there's no need for us to see the broker revenue. You left that question up there earlier on your scroll. I like what you said earlier. It is a proprietary information. All right, so I agree with you on that. And then my main question: do you think this UPS strike is going to jack up some rates for that particular? I know they do consolidated. It's not just all city stuff. But don't you think that's they're gonna use some other resources, outside resources, to haul that stuff?
Yes. Well, to the first part, something that I think I left out a little bit. If somebody was sued and they did go to court over trying to get these documents from a broker, in the past there have been lawsuits requesting this paperwork, and the court has ruled that it is proprietary information, that only each party is allowed to see their portion of the transaction, because it is proprietary and contracted rates and so forth are not the business of the other party. So in some cases, it has been ruled that you may not be able to get those documents, even if you took the broker to court. But I agree with you. It's absolutely not required. It is, and you reminded me when you said it's proprietary information. It absolutely is. What the broker makes is proprietary, just like it's proprietary information to know what any carrier makes. To the second part of your question,
That's right.
will the UPS strike change anything? It may. UPS is a big player. That being said, apparently these strikes are supposed to be focused on their package delivery, not so much their LTL freight. I don't know that it'll have a huge impact. It depends on how severe this strike gets. Teamsters has a way of it may not be a complete work stoppage. It'll be a work slowdown. Things will still happen. Depends on how severe the union wants to get with it. And again, it will not affect the LTL carrier side so much, which is more the Coyote logistics brokered stuff and the consolidation that you mentioned. It's more going to be the guys driving those brown vans around and doing the actual delivery stuff. But it could affect things because over the next couple of months, especially now that we're into peak season, that is the primary spike. That is the biggest spike in the freight market, is going into the peak season and supplementing these package delivery carriers, moving from one distribution center to the other. So it could change, but if it does, it's going to change it for I think the negative, because there will not be the volume moving that we would have expected, because the guys in the brown vans. Go ahead.
I thought it was in the freight. I thought it was in the UPS freight, not the parcel service part. Or is it all of them?
Well, what I last read was it'll be more on the parcel service, not the freight side, not the LTL side. So it will be not as affected. Sure. That being said, the parcel service is contracted out to moving freight, especially during peak season for Christmas season. A lot of that is moved on the truckload sector. So it will change things, but if they slow down, it may not be as much volume as we expect. I mean, there will be volumes. There will be a lot of disappointed kids on Christmas morning if their packages don't arrive on time. But if the union has their way and they slow things down before Christmas, it may not be good for Christmas, and that'll be a big hit to UPS, which is why. And to be honest with you, I haven't read a whole lot of details about this other than a few headlines. If they do this before Christmas during peak season, that could be a huge hit to UPS, and I could see some legal action taking place between them and the union, and who knows what'll happen. So we'll see. If it does happen, it could slow things down, and it may plateau the spike that we normally see, which will be a bad thing for us, but I don't think it'll have a huge effect right off the bat. I think if they do anything, the bigger effects may be after the Christmas season, where we don't see as much effect on the truckload sector anyhow.
Very good. I have one more question.
Sure.
The other day, I posted something about the reason for the drop in rates, and you responded. It had something to do with excessive overstock, and then the article stated that the lead time was extended. What does that mean, lead time? Am I not grasping this? What does lead time mean?
Okay, so over the past decade or so, we have moved more into just-in-time freight. Maybe even 15 to 20 years or so. We've moved more into a just-in-time freight scenario where literally if a truck did not arrive on time, it could shut the plants down. When this idea first happened, there was a lot of the big factories, the auto plants and so forth, did away with most of their warehousing. That freed up a lot of space because they had giant warehouses sitting vacant now, freed up a lot of space for other things, also freed up a lot of cost because now their warehouses are literally rolling out on the road, freed up the personnel to manage the warehouse because literally the warehouses are rolling out on the road. They don't have to have a warehouse management system in place and so forth. So they went to a just-in-time freight system, but they still have warehousing available. Because of a lot of the events earlier this year, we had the tariffs that hit with Trump. There were a lot of pre-buys because the imports and exports were affected. A lot of the big Fortune 500 companies pre-purchased a lot of materials, so they brought that in and they've got it stocked in their warehouses, cut down on a lot of the just-in-time freight opportunities. And also because they have a back stock of a lot of the materials, they have the option to, instead of a just-in-time, they can pre-order a few weeks ahead of time. That gives, if anybody is on the spot market knows, if you wait till the day of a shipment, typically the broker has to pay out quite a bit more. But when they have the lead time and they can put it out a week or 2 weeks ahead of time and pre-book those trucks, or even better, put it on those contracted trucks where they already have it set up weeks ahead of time and can provide the carrier with the consistency, they're able to keep their costs down, which is overall keeps the average freight rates down. So statistically, it looks like the shippers have increased their lead time on getting a lot of these shipments in and out.
Very good. Thank you. That's all I have for you, Kenny.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks for calling in, and call in again next time. I'm going to go to Jay in Missouri. There he is. Sorry, we lost Chris there on the phones. Jay, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on.
What's on your mind? It looks like you had some comments about what we were talking about here a few minutes ago.
I made a couple comments. Yeah, I mean it's a perpetual debate. I guess I was compelled to try and contribute because I think that maybe the point of view you're sharing is more pro-broker than pro-carrier, at least for this evening.
Yes.
Because as you said, you're kind of giving a speech maybe. And I know that a lot of carriers feel like they're at such a disadvantage, not having any access to what the shipper's actually paying, that it really affects in many instances, and everything is an exception. That's one of the problems here. And I don't agree there shouldn't be like a law or a regulation, because that's just going to muck it up even further.
Right.
But when I know in auto transport, as a carrier that is going to move a vehicle and has asked, listen, we need more room on this rate for this to be a reasonable revenue generating move. It's a brand new truck. This is something that would require X more dollars to be a reasonable market value. And the carrier says these things, and the broker shoots them down. And the carrier says, I'm going to go ahead and do it on this one. And then finds out that they really got half or less of what the shipper actually paid.
Right.
That's wrong.
Why?
Isn't it?
Why? What's wrong about it?
Oh, I thought you said right.
No, why? Why?
Right.
What's wrong with that?
Because the carrier really did deserve.
Whoa. Why would they? Why is
right,
anybody
what's deserve, right?
Right.
Because the carrier is the carrier doing the work, has the expense. I know this is where we get into debate
Right.
of who's at risk. And listen, I realize the broker has the customer. I get that. But in many cases, the carrier really does need a little bit more money, especially, listen, they're a good carrier. There's nothing wrong with this carrier in the example that I'm giving. And I know that I didn't call to convince you. I didn't call to convince
Well,
anybody.
I'm letting you say your piece, and then
I
I just want to respond to that, but go ahead.
And I appreciate that. So let me take a breath. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so you said that the carrier deserves that, and the broker is taking advantage of them. My question to that is, why would you, as the carrier, agree to that rate?
Right. And that's actually what carriers are saying to each other.
Right. Well, here's
the
thing.
problem is, many carriers feel like they got to try and put bread on the table somehow in that backhaul situation, because we know this is what happens in many backhaul situations, right?
Right.
This is where the real pit is most visible, and they're trying to put bread on the table and get back home for something that makes something, and they're stuck and they're caught, and they feel like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and take this. I don't want to, but I'm going to hold my nose, just like at the polls. I'm going to hold my nose and just take this thing and hope that it gets better.
Okay, hope what gets better?
You don't know about that situation?
Yeah. Well, what hope what gets better?
The rates.
Yeah. Why would you take that?
I'm speaking as a carrier. Listen,
I'm asking.
Speaking as a carrier in this example.
And I'm just kind of fishing this out of you. Why would you take that load and not just get another load?
I'm with you. You know what? That's where sometimes carriers have their back up against a wall. They're trying to find something that makes sense.
Okay.
They can't find anything that fits in there, and they got to move. And their ELD's ticking.
Okay.
Listen, they've got regulations telling them they better get moving or they're not going to get home on time, and this problem's just going to get worse.
So they have to go, and there's nothing else.
Which is another reason why I actually.
So they have to get moving, and there's nothing else for them to take. So
I'm taking a breath.
And they.
You heard. You know that problem does exist.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens.
Absolutely, it happens. And I don't disagree with you. But here's what I'm getting at. They don't take anything else because there's nothing else available that's easy for them to take, right? Nothing else fits. That's the only thing that would really fit, and it doesn't have the rate that they want, so they're willing to make the exception because that's the only thing available at the time. Is that the gist of it?
Say it again, if you would. I was reading. Curtis said you're not going to convince someone that is very educated in this business. I find that interesting.
Well,
education is not at conflict with need. The two overlap.
Okay, yeah. Well, okay, so what I was saying was the reason that
and William says, welcome to free market capitalism. I totally agree.
Right.
That's what we get. This is capitalism.
Right.
And I agree with you. This is free market capitalism.
Absolutely, and that's kind of where I'm going with this.
It's not always pretty. It's like sausage making.
Exactly, and
the way it works.
The reason you would just take that load and take it at a lower rate than you would prefer is because there was nothing else available at the time that would fit your need, right?
Well, and I see where you're headed. But that doesn't negate that the broker had the money, but knew that with free market capitalism, that because the market bears what the market bears, they could go ahead and do what they were doing. Again, I get it. I really do. I know how it works.
Right.
I'm just saying there are instances where, and you know it, you do remember a time where maybe you were a driver struggling.
Sure.
And you took stuff you didn't want to take, but you felt you had to. And when you found out what was being charged to the shipper, it left a really bad taste in your mouth. And earlier, when you mentioned a broker that you didn't think was a good broker, I assumed that was one of the reasons why you said that, but that was because of a contract, I believe.
Yeah. I have never had a problem with a broker over a rate. Never, ever have I had a problem for a broker rate. I mean, there's loads I have turned down because the rate wasn't what I wanted, of course, but I have never, blacklisted a broker because they didn't offer enough money or anything like that. Never. I've you've done the cheap freight loads and so forth, but contract issues and other things that we can't resolve, that's a different story. But cheap rates, that's never been an issue for me. I'll just move on to another load. The reason why the broker is able to do that is because you don't accept it, the next truck will. It's supply and demand. Now, here's the thing. This happens a lot. I use Florida as an example a lot. Here in Florida, similar to the example I gave about that load I was bidding from Virginia to Ohio, but it had to come along as a package deal with Virginia to Connecticut. Similar things happen down here in Florida. Here in Florida, you will find that pretty much year-round, shippers pay about the same rate, 12 months out of the year. I have a direct shipper down here in Florida, as a matter of fact. I cannot get that load covered most of the time. I mean, it's a struggle to get the load covered most of the time 9 months out of the year because the rate is just not that good. 9 months out of the year, it's a load that comes into Florida. The customer is the receiver. So they're paying the truck to come into Florida. 9 months out of the year, getting that load covered is a struggle. Almost impossible. I would have to take a loss on it. That being said, during the 3 months of peak season here in Florida, I have to beat people off that load with a bat. And that's the only time of the year where I can make money on that load. The rest of the year, I cannot make money on that load. I lose money on that load the rest of the year because it just does not pay enough coming into Florida. Because you have to make enough to come into Florida 9 months out of the year to deadhead out, except for produce season. Everybody tends to know that. So those 3 months of produce season, you better believe that I take the lion's share of that rate because I have to make up the difference for the rest of the time. And the reason the shipper does that, again, is because when that product gets on the store shelf, they want it to be the same price year round. You know, if it's some kind of a widget, a toy, you know, let's just say it's children's toys, and that children's toy is on the shelf in May, it has to be the same price as it is in August, September, October, November, the rest of the year. When it doesn't matter that produce season happened. Produce season shouldn't affect the price of a kid's toy, right? At least that's how the shipper sees it. So they pay the same price year round. So absolutely, during that 3 months,
when I understand,
right,
the moving parts behind the scenes help the standardization of the price in the long run in the aggregate. I get that. I really do. You know, I want to say this because I see I see some challenges in the live chat, and I get that too. Listen, I'm not here to change anyone's mind or start a GoFundMe or anything like that. I'm merely saying that, you know, you do know there are times where a carrier feels like he's probably going to have to make a really bad decision to take something he doesn't want to take, and he's caught in a situation where he really wishes he had more power back, which is actually something I do like to talk about, which is coaching drivers and helping them go for customers directly. But the problem is we need brokers.
Right.
This is an ecosystem.
And
so
I will tell you this.
About that, and I understand free market capitalism. It exists, and I like it too. But it has some downsides. We know that. And
I will tell you this. The shippers that tend to work with the small carriers will do the exact same thing. Shippers know the markets as well. The reason that this customer that I have in Florida, the reason that they work with me as a broker is because they know that as the broker, I would be able to absorb that and help them equalize that cost. But if they were to do it on their own, they would do the same thing. They would pay less when they don't need to. And they would pocket that money and they would pay less. All shippers would. It is supply and demand. And there's no conspiracy. The brokers, you know, that's the one thing is, it's a conspiracy theory, and the brokers have all gotten together, they're ganging up on us, and that's all nonsense. I can tell you what, most brokers do not like each other. They're not ganging up on anybody, right? So it's just simple supply and demand economics. If there are more trucks than loads, why would you pay them? Why would I pay a truck that otherwise is going to leave empty out of Florida when there's 3 trucks to every load out of Florida? Why would you pay more, right? Because you don't have to.
So, but here's a question. Why does a broker say, you're a preferred carrier, I'm going to take care of you? Because they know that there's value in paying somebody that you prefer a better rate to work with.
which is why
right.
I
and
preach.
So that means value is a respected commodity.
Absolutely.
Even in the GoFundMe.
Absolutely, and which is why I tell people, especially earlier this year, the market was banging, right? We were setting records. And I told people, don't rake every broker over the coals.
I heard you talking about it.
Build relationships. Become that trusted go-to carrier, because when things change, turn around. And I can tell you that we have some customers. We just pulled an almost $5 a mile load out of Florida this past week, because we have a trusted relationship with somebody, right? In this market, we were able to do that. And that kind of stuff doesn't happen off the load board. You have to build those relationships. And what you're saying, when they recognize that you have value there, they will pay you what you're worth. And the commodity has a lot to do with it. Nobody's going to pay extra to haul garbage scrap, to the dump. But they might pay you more if it's a high value product that needs that extra care and attention that a trusted carrier will give it.
Well, what I think we can all agree on, I would hope so, is that you can't live off load boards for this reason. If you want to get taken advantage of, live off the load boards. But if you want to make a better life and retain more of what the shipper's actually paying, make a relationship.
Absolutely. Build a relationship, and one of my drivers, Dave, is in here, and we had a debate over that relationship. People get hung up on relationship, and somebody once told me, oh, you mean I have to go and take every broker out to lunch, and I have to go and, all this stuff? I said, no. Maybe the word isn't relationship. Dave and I agree that the word is rapport. You need to build rapport so that broker knows you are the trusted person that they can call to get the job done. It doesn't mean you have to go out on a date with them. You just have to make sure that they trust you to get the job done. And all of the tactics.
Good word. That is good.
All of the tactics that you've discussed about the broker saying that's all I have in it and all that kind of stuff, those are just negotiation tactics, which is the reason I talk so much about negotiation. If you can see through some of that stuff and counter some of that in other ways, using other negotiation methods, it helps.
And let me just say this. When negotiation turns to lying, because the carrier, if the carrier thinks the broker's lying to them in the negotiation, then the carrier's going to lie to the broker about what's really happening with the transport.
Sure.
And you can call that whatever you want to, but right? I mean, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a system that we actually wish just worked better in general sometimes. Which brings us back to rapport and relationship.
Exactly. Now, rapport and relationships, if you are negotiating with lies and deceit, it's not going to be a win-win negotiation. It's not going anywhere.
Well, I agree with you.
But if you build that relationship and build that rapport, then absolutely, then you can build something bigger, and you'll get the load delivered, and you'll build that trust. So for sure. But by and large, all of the rates, everything. Somebody says, "Oh, the brokers set all the rates." Brokers don't set anything. Let's say that every broker did agree. Every broker got together and say, we will not pay more than $1.50 a mile on any load in the country ever. Never, ever will we do that. What happens when nobody accepts the loads? And it won't be, maybe there will be some.
You know what's interesting?
Maybe some will get desperate and they'll accept $1.50, but not everybody will, and not every load will get moved, and eventually they'll have to put more money on it. Just because of supply and demand. Eventually, if everything was $1.50, a lot of people would go out of business or sell their trucks and go back to doing flipping burgers or whatever else they want to do. And eventually, there won't be enough trucks to move it at $1.50, and they have to pay more. That's supply and demand.
What's interesting is that because I'm reading like Curtis's comments. I think that maybe this is where there's a lot of difference between auto transport load boards and freight load boards.
Yes.
I know guys that live off of auto transport load boards, and it's only so long before they got to do something else. They have to build a rapport with somebody directly.
Yes.
Now, Curtis, he's been doing it for 12 years. That's awesome, Curtis. Man, I don't, we don't have to talk GoFundMe and flowers. We don't have to do that. If you got something working for you, I am sincerely happy for you. But I am saying I called in to talk about, when you get into the negotiation, And if there's lying that happens, it gets ugly and it ruins the system. That's my whole point.
Agreed. And again, and that goes both ways, brokers and carriers. And there are absolutely some used car salesman type negotiator brokers out there that will do whatever they want to do to try to make the deal. But a good negotiator,
that's right.
And certainly, I mean, any negotiator, but I have absolutely, sitting on the other side of the table as a broker, again, I have come across some real doozy carriers. I mean, some that I have audio recordings of some of the phone calls that I would be ashamed to put out in the public. Absolutely ashamed, which is why I can't do it. I just can't put some of this stuff out. A couple of my drivers and stuff have heard some of these just for training calls and things, and they could vouch for it. I cannot put some of this stuff out because it's just absolute horrible. And they've heard a couple of them, but I have dozens of things that some of these carriers say that are just outrageous. So, but that being said,
I believe it. I totally believe it, and that's why I'm not going to say there. I mean, it's all around. There's enough to go all around. There is, and that includes brokers.
Absolutely, but
and carriers.
But that being said,
60 seconds.
Times shippers.
That being said, it's still supply and demand. So when you get into markets,
I never said it wasn't.
Right, and when you get into markets, there's
never said it wasn't.
There's plenty to go around, but if
I love free market capitalism. That's why I get cheap items on Amazon.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So, and it's funny that you say that because, I mean, you see both sides of the coin, but one of the things that you said, and I caught this several times, you said that the driver deserves this, and you feel upset, and you've said this several times, you feel a certain way, it makes you upset, and you feel taken advantage of. All of those things are emotional cues.
I didn't say me. I said carriers.
Carriers. Well, yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not a carrier.
10 seconds.
Yes, and I don't mean to single you out, but
talk to carriers.
But
when get upset.
But the terminology you're using is indicating it's an emotional response. It's not a logical business response and a logical business decision that people make. It is, and all of this stuff and everything that spawned this whole concept of the show tonight was people getting these emotional. Go ahead.
Okay, but you've seen carriers talk in rate per mile masters Facebook group. You've seen that, and
Sure.
There are many carriers, and those are freight haulers complaining about rates. Now, I mean, if you want to talk about emotional carriers, I'll bet there's more to talk about than with brokers. Because I mean, you look in any Facebook group, and you go ahead and tell carriers they're emotional.
Oh, yeah.
They might be emotional because they're worried about putting money and food on the table. I mean, I'm chiming in with what I've read in the group. This is what carriers say.
I completely agree with you, but it is emotional. And what I'm suggesting, and the reason that I did this show tonight is because I understand anybody that's watching that has that response, understand it is an emotional response, but especially for anybody that got into business in January and February and was absolutely living high on the hog. And I put this warning out several times earlier this year. I told people, do not go buy a new motorcycle. Do not go buy a new snowmobile and a new house and a new boat. Do not do that. I put that warning out several times this year. And
I agree with you.
And a lot of people did it.
Don't.
A lot of people did it. A lot of people went out and bought a truck, got into this business for the first time. I have people that are leased to me that were in other industries, and because rates were so good, they came back to this industry this year because they saw the money that could be made. And we're Freight Waves Sonar has the data to show that just since the ELD mandate, and they were looking to see how did the ELD mandate itself affect the market, but what they found was pretty interesting. Since April, when the hard enforcement date happened here in April, they added about 4% capacity in 6 months. 4% capacity in that short of a time frame, that's like opening up the floodgates. I mean, that's a huge hit to the market. I remember back in 2014 talking to the analysts then saying that the reason we were setting record rates in 2014 was there was about a 2 to 3% capacity crunch. And now we have added 4% capacity in only 6 months. That's why we're seeing these rates equalize and level out. And I will say this, we're going to see, this is my prediction, I don't have a crystal ball, but we are going to see rates do their normal spike for the holiday season. But come first quarter next year, hold on, because you better have all of your loose ends tied up. It's going to be tight. First quarter, January, February, is always the slowest quarter or slowest months of the year. And I expect those to put people out of business this year. I really do.
Well, same in auto transport. This is the beginning of the downturn. It's going to last for a while. I've also heard in the market itself some doom and gloom talk about the market. But I do know ultimately I talk to folks on a regular basis that are looking for auto transport business coaching, and they have bought their equipment before some heart-to-heart strategy of how they're going to get loads. And I would love to talk to more folks before they actually got their truck and trailer of how we're going to build rapport and relationships and not be at the mercy of the rates as they're just posted without knowing what you're getting into.
Well, let me tell you something on the other side of that. Right next to my office, right where I'm sitting right now, there is a fairly decent sized, volume-wise anyway, auto broker. And they haven't even been in the office in 2 or 3 weeks. Things have gotten so slow that they've just kind of waited. They're just hanging things up for now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've seen them stop in a couple of times just to, to clean things up and so forth, and the odds and ends things. But they had eight employees in there.
For Thanksgiving.
Yeah, yeah, that's about it. They had 8 full-time employees in there that I haven't seen any of them in the past couple of weeks.
And listen, and that clearly is a sign that rates are going to drop, because I know volume drops in the winter too, and that is again that's part of free market capitalism. So.
Absolutely.
It is the way it is. But listen, man, you know what? I got to run. I really appreciate you having me on my show tonight, having me on your show tonight. I got my show coming up, so
what is your show? Go ahead and plug it.
I got to get back to that.
What is your show?
All right, so listen, Auto Transport Intel, live at 8 p.m. Central Time every Tuesday. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Time, so that's in about 25 minutes I go live. My show's about 2 to 3 hours, and what's really funny is tonight's show is Ask a Broker.
Okay, here we go.
How do you like that?
Perfect. Yeah, I'll tune into that one as well. Auto Transport Intel. Awesome. I appreciate it, Jay.
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah, thank you so much, Kenny. Great talking to you.
You as well. Thanks for calling in. I hope to have you on again sometime. All right, I'm going to the phone lines are now closed. Anybody that happens to be on the line still, if you have any last-minute things, go ahead and press 1. I'm going to blow through a couple of these questions here and wow, I missed a lot of them here. I'm going to blow through a few of these. Let's see. And Truck Driver Survival, another Facebook group. That was Chris that came on with us. He's participating in the comments here. The carrier is the customer. Why would any business provide bad customer service? The customer will find a service that will do it if you won't. Absolutely. And something else to consider, and that's William Hepler says this, and something else to consider, I'm bringing on owner-operators right now. If it becomes more profitable to get rid of owner-operators and hire company trucks, maybe that's what I would do. And for that matter, brokers could just go out and get their carrier authority, become a carrier. If they have the customers, they already have the customers, they could easily go out and get trucks. Unfortunately, the trucking end of this is the lowest end of the totem pole. And let's take that a step further. If rates get too high, the shippers can go out and get trucks. As a matter of fact, one of our direct shippers earlier this year, we could not agree to a price. They're based out of Canada. They flew in some drivers, rented a Penske truck, and did it themselves. We couldn't agree on a price. They just did it themselves. So, absolutely, the shippers, it's cheap. It's kind of a little bit of a, I I don't know what you would call this, but a lot of people say there's no money in trucking. In some ways, that's true. The money doesn't come from trucking. Trucking is a service. The money comes from the products that are sold, products that are shipped. That's where the money comes from. The products that are manufactured and sold to someone else. We just move it. There's no money in trucking. The money has to flow from somewhere else. So that being said, shippers, if they really want to save money, if rates get high enough, it might just be worth it for shippers to go out and buy their own trucks and do it themselves. Shippers don't have to make money on the trucks. They're making money on the products. So they'll just buy trucks, hire a driver, and go to work. It's easier. So there's always going to be a point where it doesn't make sense to hire an outside carrier, an outside driver, outside broker, whatever it is, and it makes sense to just do it yourself. And until, rates stay below that, until rates get above that, we don't have a whole lot of leverage the other way around. When rates get above that, we don't have a whole lot of leverage on what we're going to do. Thought you meant the carrier was the broker's customer. No. Sorry about that. If I said that before, the shipper is the broker's customer. The broker is the carrier's customer. The carrier is the owner-operator and the driver's customer. And you have to provide the service to your customer. Dave says, I don't need to know what a broker makes. I need to know why people become brokers with zero industry knowledge and undercut each other, allowing freight to sit. Again, I don't see a lot of freight sitting, Dave. I don't know that a lot of freight is sitting. Freight's moving, and it might not be moving at the rates that you would like to see it moving, but this is supply and demand, and the trucks are undercutting each other as well. This is an open market and a bid to the bottom. Somebody said the brokers are taking 50% of the freight rate. They're selling a load for whatever it is, $2,000. They hire a truck for $1,000. If that was true, if there was that much profit in it, I guarantee you that shipper is looking for a cheaper broker. And I guarantee you, I just told you, I have full-time people working for me. Over the past few weeks, they've made thousands of phone calls. And I guarantee you, this is one person working for me. I have been to brokerage offices that have a sea of people. It's like walking into one in particular I went to. It was actually an old Walmart store. And you walk in, and it's hundreds of people with phones and computers. Hundreds of people. And their job, each one of them, has to make a minimum of 40 brand new phone calls, new contacts every single day. 40. And in addition to the 40 brand new contacts, they have to follow up with all of their old contacts. That's one brokerage with hundreds of people. There are thousands of brokers out there. I'm one with one person doing this for me. There are thousands. There are tens of thousands of brokers making phone calls to get freight. So tell me that if a broker was taking 50% of the rate, that a shipper wouldn't answer one of those tens of thousands of phone calls they get and say, you know what? I'm looking to figure out why this guy is charging me so much. Is there anything you can do for me? Brokers are not making that much money, I guarantee you. I guarantee you. It might happen on a rare occasion, but it is not happening on a regular basis. I guarantee you that. Okay. And Auto Transport Intel, Jay, did join us. He said he's on hold. I'm going way back here. And Jay, I would love to collaborate with you sometime in the future on more of this. This is the first I've heard of your show, actually. So thank you for joining me over here. Who assumes more risk, the broker or the carrier? That is a very good question. And I would say that it's probably equal risk, although it's a different type of risk. Obviously, the carrier has the risk of getting in an accident and suing, getting sued because the equipment fails and somebody could get hurt and all that. At the same time, that broker assumes that same risk. Again, the carrier is going to get sued, and so is the broker. There was matter of fact, it was J.B. Hunt. just a couple of months ago, J.B. Hunt hired as a brokered a load to a carrier. That carrier, the owner-operator for that carrier was driving under the influence and got in an accident and killed somebody. The carrier was sued, and so was J.B. Hunt as a broker. J.B. Hunt as a broker was held liable. I believe it was $6 million. It was a $6 million lawsuit. The broker was responsible. The broker has no way to know what truck. They hire a carrier. They can do all the background checks on the carrier. There's no way for a broker to check to see the driver's records, to check to see if the truck's been maintained, to check all of those individual details. They can hire the carrier. The carrier would be at will to put anything they want on that load on any truck that they want. There's virtually no way. Yet, that broker was held responsible for, I believe it was $6 million. So who holds the most responsibility? The broker holds the same responsibility as the carrier as far as if there's an accident or if there's a claim, but they also take on the additional added responsibility of they have to extend the credit to the carrier, or I'm sorry, the shipper, typically have to pay the broker, or I'm getting my terms all messed up here. Time to wrap this show up. They have to extend credit to the shipper, and they have to pay the carrier, typically before they collect payment. And that being said, they assume risk on both sides. And if the shipper doesn't pay, they still have to pay the broker or the carrier, and the carrier will file on their bond if they don't. That which essentially puts them out of business. So in many ways, the broker themselves take more risk and responsibility than the carrier does. Day and Night says it's not what the broker makes, it's more what is the freight that really pays. Again, what the freight pays and what the broker makes is really irrelevant as well. I gave examples already where different times of the year it might be more or less. In some markets it pays the same year round and the broker has to adjust out of their own pocket. There are way too many variables to use information that you harvest. You find the invoices and so forth. It doesn't help a whole lot. There's no need for wanting to know what a broker makes at the end of the day. Everyone is getting their cut. Absolutely. Mr. Preston, the only reason I would need to know is when I would want to grow into your sector of the industry, I could see your bidding process. Everybody, I would love to see what every other carrier is making as well. So I would know how to undercut them. So you would love to see my numbers so that you could undercut me. Of course. Of course. So, I mean, that's what you're saying is, as a carrier, you would like to see my numbers so that you could go in and basically do the same thing and be competitive with me. That's why it's proprietary information. That's why I don't think most brokers are not going to give that out. You might have to take them to court. But even in court, that would be the argument that they're going to make. And in the past, it has gone in the favor of the broker, where the judge says, no, it's proprietary information. There's no good reason for you to have that, even though that is the regulation. If the carrier deserves more, he should have charged more. And again, that was William Hepler. If the carrier deserves more, he should have charged more. And absolutely, the carrier can charge whatever they want. They can charge $1 a mile. They can charge $100 a mile. But ultimately, it is the market that sets the rate. They can charge whatever they want. And if they agree to haul it for a certain rate, that's on them. Maybe they can find a better load, a different market, change their operation somehow and get a better rate. But ultimately, the market sets the rate. The brokers don't set the rates. The shippers don't set the rates. The carriers don't set the rates. The supply and demand of the market sets the rates. Because if you can't have it doesn't pay enough to get a truck to move it. And let's just say that, for example, there are 5 loads and only 1 truck. Which load will that truck take? Obviously, they're going to take the highest paying one. So that's going to bring all of them up. They're all going to compete with each other. I want that truck, so I'm going to pay more. Well, I'm not going to let you have the truck. I'm going to pay more than you. And that's going to drive the rates up as well. And that truck, and obviously that one truck isn't going to change the whole market. But when the whole market is doing this, it naturally, automatically brings the rates up. Arturo's World. Guys, it's a free market for a reason. The carrier's entitled and has the freedom to go directly to the shippers and do the broker's work. Also, there's many factors that go into a rate. Absolutely. The carrier can go to the shipper, but the shipper may not want to work with a carrier for different reasons. Free market at its finest. Let's see. Would you want more regulations, especially in how much we can charge? And that's the other side of this argument. If we have to make the brokers open their books, who wants to stop to make the carriers open their books? So if you do the math and every carrier on average, maybe their price around $1.60 to $1.70 a mile is their actual cost, well, then who's to say that that's all that they can make? They can make 5% above cost. Is that fair? Possibly not. It's a business. Run it like one. Absolutely. And Columbia Glider Day says, so even in the pad wrap segment, rates can vary widely. We have to figure out how to get our rate when we compete against subpar carriers. And that's true. And what we saw in this past year is a lot of the pad wrap carriers got out of doing pad wrap because pad wrap was already a premium priced segment. And when general freight came up, the pad wrap customers couldn't necessarily justify adding more to their rates. So a lot of the pad wrap carriers turned it in and went back to general freight for a while. So that changed the market there a little bit. And I was not reading this. I guess I have a question for the caller. Let's see. Would you want regulation on how much carriers make? We just went over that. I'm going to blow through this here. We're going up on 2 hours. It's all about expressing our concerns and discussing it. We can go back and forth all day. All right. Okay. I appreciate all of your support, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. We are going to wrap things up. I didn't do a show last week, so 2 hours. You guys deserve it, right? You deserve it because you're entitled, and this is what I have to give you. So you're entitled to this. There you go. Kenny's like 30 minutes behind on the question. I am wrapping it up with that. So, okay. Have a good night, everyone. Remember, aim high, dream big, strategize your plan. Earn your success because nobody deserves anything, as we already talked about, because only you drive you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.